Welcome to What Nobody Tells You, Practical Truths for a Better Life. What Nobody Tells You is a podcast about the hidden wisdom that actually helps you live better, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. I'm your host, James Ferrigno. Join me as we explore the truths most people never hear in areas like practical tips on daily living, how to be vulnerable in a healthy relationship, and what it really takes to change your life from the inside out. Through honest solo episodes and deep conversations with guests from the world of social participation, healing, human development, and creatively navigating bureaucracy, this show brings practical insights you can use right away. This isn't surface-level self-help. It's the real work, the quiet wisdom, the things nobody told you, but you should have. If you're looking for clarity, courage, and the tools of everyday life, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, James Ferrigno, and welcome to What Nobody Tells You. Today on What Nobody Tells You, I want to talk about communication skills, and I want to focus on, to begin with, an important part of communication skills, which is being able to communicate and deal with your emotions when you're triggered. Now, for those of us who haven't heard that term before, I think most of us have, but it means when you become upset. You could become angry. You could get depressed or sad. You could get scared and want to run away. So we have these different reactions to being triggered, which is not my favorite term, but it's the term we have. So because it covers that emotional hit that we get when we believe that we've been wronged in some way. So if you've ever thought that someone hurt your feelings, that's getting triggered. You know, the classic example, a car cuts you off in traffic. There's this swelling of anger that can come up in some people. But it could also be, maybe someone saying something mean to you or whatever it is. This can happen a lot with people that are close to you, family members, partners. It especially happens in relationships. And I think that's where it's the most difficult for most people to deal with, because we can be more open around our family members emotionally, and we can get triggered more easily then, and we're really sensitive. There's other reasons for it as well. But yeah, so we get triggered, and then what do we do? So what usually happens, the standard response for most people, is to get angry and then judge and blame the other person. So if the other person says, you're always doing that, or, you never clean your room, you never clean the bathroom, whatever it is. And so they say that to you and you go, maybe you did clean the bathroom. And they say, you never clean the bathroom. Now that could make you, let's say if it makes you sad, if it makes you angry at them, if it makes you want to just run away from the situation, then you've been triggered. And usually what will happen, not always, or if you shut down, that's also a very important one, is that you can shut down, which is more popular with men to shut down. I know I've been and still can be guilty of that. It's just a closing down. I was just listening to a song by ELO, Electric Light Orchestra, called "Turn to Stone," and I think it's clear that that's what that's about. When the emotions get too big for some people, they will just become quiet and still and turn to stone. I think that's a good way to describe it. And so you can have those reactions. So the normal response, the most common response, is to then blame the other person or to defend yourself. When I did clean the bathroom, I swear, I cleaned it on Wednesday and I cleaned it last Sunday, And then you're trying to defend yourself from what you're perceiving as an attack. Or you can say, but you never cleaned the bathroom and da, 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 da. And why are you talking to me that way? Whatever it is, you either attack back or defend. And as soon as you attack the other person or defend yourself, do either of those things, now you're in combat. Now you're in a situation where you are against each other. And it really does take two to tango here. It takes two people to do it effectively to allow it to continue. If one person is triggered, if the other person has a high level of skill and they just completely do not buy into it and do not participate in the blaming at all, they can diffuse the situation. That level of skill is very rare. So people tend to either get in the attacking and defending thing, which creates some kind of argument or fight, or they shut down, or they exit. Now, exiting isn't the worst thing because it can allow those things not to happen, but it's not a permanent solution. It's temporarily for that day, for that time. It is better than the blow up, but in the long run, you want to learn what to do. What happens within us when we get triggered, and how do we start thinking and feeling about other people? Really, the first level of this kind of escalation is simple judgment. Now, when people talk about judgment, we're not talking about discernment. We're not talking about being able to tell the difference between two things, or being able to tell which thing is better for you than the other, or whether something is dangerous or not. So that type of judgment, I think, is more clearly described as a discernment. We're talking about a judgment that is like prejudgment, that is simply a disapproval of something else, of believing it is wrong and not wanting it to be doing what it's doing, or not wanting it to exist. And once you get into that situation, now you have set the boundaries of the match. You are now in a position of combat, of competition against the thing. You have now set yourself against the thing. And an interesting thing, and you've probably heard, energy flows where attention goes. So when you set yourself against something, you actually give it energy, you give it power. So this is why these situations aren't great and can escalate, because you're giving your energy and power away to this other thing when you judge it. And most of us don't want to give our energy and power away to something. You're also giving your self-control, your ability to have the feelings that you want to have. Now you have this uncomfortable feeling that you don't like, right? And when you give in to that judgment, when you're experiencing that, I'm not saying that it's wrong to experience judgment either. So let's be clear about that. This is just a stage of development that everyone is going through. And if we just expand our awareness a bit and look at the situation, and we understand the process of what's happening, it can be easier on us to go through the process, and we can grow through it so that it no longer happens eventually, when we can see what's happening. So having awareness of it is the first step to being able to master it and master our own internal state and our own internal emotions, and make them what we want them to be, not let other people or people cutting us off in traffic be able to control us. Because that's what's happening. You're allowing other people and things to control your inner state. Judgment is just the first level of this. The next step that we could go to is blame. So thinking or saying the other person is at fault. I'm going to frame this in that it's two people. It can be things, or, cars cutting you off, or political things you see on the news, weather, almost anything can trigger people, but I think it's both most important and more instructive to look at what happens in a relationship between two people. So the next stage is blame, thinking or saying the other person is at fault, as if the event you do not like would not have happened if the other person hadn't taken the actions. And that's the concept of fault, which I'll talk about for a second here. So in this world, the way things are happening, now this can be a little hard to grasp and get your head around. It took me a little while, is that because we're raised to believe in cause and effect, to believe one thing precedes another thing. And to some extent, there is a relationship there. It's not that the things aren't related. It's not that the things don't coexist, right? So if someone falls in water, they get wet, right? So yes, that is related. But one doesn't actually cause the other. It's hard to understand that because we're in this temporal reality and we experience reality in a progress of time. So we experience it one moment at a time, 1 second in an order. But outside of this reality, we're just in this reality for now. Actually, all these things happen at once. Time is just a construct that we're inside right now, but in the larger reality, everything is happening simultaneously. So it may appear to us that one thing caused another thing because it came before it, but in true reality, there is no before. So these two things just arose together, and in a way, they caused each other. So the two things just have a relationship with each other, right? They're connected. And when there's no cause and effect, it's impossible for there to be fault. So nothing is anyone's fault because you couldn't have caused anything. So this can be a difficult concept for people. I understand, but I will put some reference material in the description so that you can look up and read about this further. Uh, of course, this is something that Buddhism has been talking about for thousands of years, but it's something that advanced physics is been really exploring over the last decade or 2 decades, or maybe even more than that. So the next step beyond placing fault on the person, and even if you don't understand the science of it or believe the philosophy or whatever, just in a practical sense, if you don't blame people and you don't place them at fault, it makes it possible to get through the situation in a manner that's best for everyone. So even if you don't understand the underlying concepts or don't accept them, that's fine. We don't need to accept everything. Be skeptical. You don't need to just accept everything I'm saying. But in practice, if you don't blame the person, if you don't place them at fault, it really opens the door to being able to resolve the situation quite nicely. So the next step is correction. So these are more severe, these steps are more and more severe triggering reactions and actions that people take. So correction. So correcting the other person's language, their behavior, their ideas, their beliefs, their reasonings, and doing that verbally or in a written form or on video. Um, just thinking things, just thinking this, you can judge someone in your head, and you can blame them in their head, but you're really not correcting someone if they don't know about it. Really, you can correct them in your head, which is something, but for the purposes of being able to deal with the person, correction in this sense means to actually correct them in a way that they are aware of it. Next level is criticism, a combination of correction and blame. So this is when you're telling someone how and why they're wrong. So when you describe, here is why you're wrong, number one, number two, number three, that's that's really a little bit further down the line. Next is accusation, which is blaming someone for being wrong in a serious way. That could include claiming what they have done is illegal or moral, like it's wrong. What you have done is wrong. You're underlining the wrong, right? So sometimes people, that's unethical, that's immoral, that's illegal. You can't do that. So all those kind of concepts go around the accusation. And that's a more severe way of attacking someone. So really all of these things are ways of, when you're against someone, you start to push harder and harder against them. The judgment, you kind of set yourself against them, right? Blame, you start to push on them. Correction, you start to kind of try and tear them apart. Criticism, you tear them apart more. Accusation, you're really, really pushing and trying to dismantle them. You're trying to win and, you know, take apart whatever it is they're doing, or maybe they're just very existence. So the next would be like a veiled threat, something like, well, then I will just have to do what I have to do then, in that case, you won't, see my grandmother this year, whatever it is. So there's a veiled threat. And now we're getting into, that's pretty mean, right? The veiled threat. You're getting into kind of mafiosa territory, really, this is not good behavior, right? Then next is the bold threat, to directly threaten someone, right? To say, I will do X to you. This will happen to you. So, and then the next step is carrying out the threat and actually taking some kind of action against them. And, people do these things all the time. And the next is, violence of some kind, which is pretty much where the end is. Then you have whatever escalations of violence. But so these are the levels that people can grow through. And I think it's just good to have them. I mean, I liked to have them organized and written down, because then it just makes me more aware of what's going on. So I can read this list and go, okay. And then when something occurs, wait, what am I doing right now? Am I judging? Am I blaming? How severe is this? And I have noticed that, well, this is the way I kind of organize this, is the emotion will get stronger as you go up the thing. So when people are threatening people, they're very upset, right? They're usually very angry. Usually when you're depressed or scared or shut down, you're not doing these things. These things tend to come with anger, not always. It can be a mix. People can be frightened, angry, sad all at the same time. But the anger part can really fuel this. And then eventually it can get to violence, and people can attack people and do all kinds of things. But it means that their emotions are just at the boiling point, right? And they have nowhere to go. They don't know what is going on. So this can help stop. This awareness can help you or anyone in certain scenarios not get to that violence point, but also to not get to the threats, to not get to the veiled threats, to not get to the correction, the criticism, the blame, and eventually not even get to the judgment. And imagine what the world would be like if we could all do that, right? If we could all just improve one level on this, right? One step, if we could just be aware enough to be able to tone down our blame and correction of others, right? And here's something to do, is just go through the day and just be aware of it. Be aware when you judge something. Be aware when you blame something. And again, judging means you have a emotion about it and you don't like it, and you want whatever it is. You want that thing to go away, or you want revenge against it, or you disagree with its existence, whatever that is. So notice when you're judging things, Notice when you're blaming people. And like I said, even if you don't understand the scientific details of it, doesn't really matter. In a practical sense, blaming people doesn't help anything. Because the thing, whatever this thing is that you're upset that they did, guess what? It already happened. It's over. You can't go backwards. You can't time travel and make it go away. It's happened. And no matter what you say to them or do to them, it has already happened. You can't erase it. You can't make it go away. So really your only real viable choice is to accept it, accept what they did, and understand that it is simply what happened. And that blaming them, judging them, punishing them is not going to change that. Studies were done on this, starting back in with B.F. Skinner, that don't quote me on the dates, but a while ago. And what they figured out was that doing tests, they test pigeons, I think they started with, and then other animals, and humans eventually have been tested, that people, if they're punished, negative reinforcement, and I know I learned a lot about this, being trained as a teacher, working as a teacher, that negative reinforcement only works temporarily. So if you punish someone, it creates fear in them, or it can, but it only works for a short period of time. And it generally only works while the person that is doing the punishment is in their presence, is there. So, this is why we have such a problem with prisons and things, is because you kind of have to have kind of this malevolent force around them all the time, repunishing and repunishing all the time to make that effective. So like, because the goal, you can think about this for yourself, but the way I see it, if you're placing someone at fault, you don't want the thing to have happened. The argument is generally, well, we don't want them to do that thing again, right? Well, and the way you can do that is to do something negative to them or do something positive to them. Really, your choices, right? Or ignore it and walk away. So what I've seen with kids, this is my experience, but I've also studied this in depth, is that when you negatively reinforce, like say, we'll just take the example of a teacher in a classroom. It will work as long as you are standing in front of the kids that you're doing it with, or kid. And it's the second you're out of the room, it's gone, unless they are absolutely terrified. Maybe if you beat them terribly, but it will still wear off. Then it won't be the second you're out of the room. It'll be a little while later. So it really is not effective at permanently changing behavior. Whereas it will temporarily change it. It will change it while you're there if they're afraid of you, but it won't change their behavior permanently. In fact, what I've seen, just this is my personal anecdotal experience, is that it actually makes it worse in the long run. Then they're out on the playground, the kids are doing it's worse. And this is just my experience. It may be different for some other people. But positive reinforcement, and I have done this, I've gone through the experiment with many, many a kid with very severe behavior problems. And I just looked for anything they were doing that was positive. Any stretch of the imagination. With some kids, trying to find something positive is hard. But, you can always find something and, praise them for it, tell them they're doing a good job, tell them how good they are. Da, da, da. And in my experience, it didn't take that long. You wanted to do it, you needed to do it all day, throughout the day, as often as you could. But after only a couple of weeks of that, I have seen dramatic changes, dramatic ones. And I used to do it with, well, I would take the kid in the school with the most severe behavior issues and practice positive reinforcement on them. And which, also it's positive reinforcement and it works. I've seen it work many times. It can be very dramatic. You think it's a different kid. The change is so huge and that it can be so quick. And I'm not saying it can be done with every single person. It can't. But most, the vast majority, in my experience, I've only run into, this is with hundreds of kids anyway. I've seen two that there are some people that can't be reached in that way, right? But with the vast majority of people, and in my personal experience as a teacher, I saw that the positive reinforcement was miraculously effective, and that negative enforcement, when I've seen it applied, is only effective temporarily, if at all. Sometimes it's not effective at all. So, yeah, and this isn't from a moral standpoint, or this isn't coming from, doesn't necessarily have to come from a place of caring about the kids or having a political viewpoint or a philosophy. Just practically, scientifically, statistically, when you look at it, when you carry out the positive reinforcement virtually all the time, it's effective and can be miraculously so. That's what I've experienced. So circling back to what we were talking about, so the blame, the correction, the fault, we want to change the other person, right? So trying to do something to them to get them not to do that in the future, or to punish them in some way. Well, if they're going to treat me that way, I'm going to treat them that way, and then they'll see how they like it. And, that is just not going to work. It just doesn't work. So you might want to try something different than that, right? And now we're not doing positive reinforcement in that same way. We are in a controlled, classroom or something, or a hospital. But in our relationships, still really important to not to try to change people. And I have also seen, related to this, that like in my own relationships, that when I have tried to change a behavior, sure, sometimes I could do it. I could put out enough effort, but often, usually, behaviors can be really difficult to change. And changing it for someone else because they don't like it, that's also a slippery slope in a relationship. Now you're changing for the other person. That can be disastrous. But in a relationship, rather than tell the person, okay, I'll try and change, or say them, you need to try and change this, just making space for it and just sharing. You can still talk about it. You want to talk about, so something comes up, you have a fight or an argument with the person you're in a relationship with. And then you don't want to just leave it, right? You just want to sit down and talk about it. But when you're talking about it, not only do we want to blame the person, it's your fault. That is not going to go anywhere good. But is to, rather than try to change your behavior or try to get them to change the behavior, I've seen that when you just open space for it and just say, okay, we're aware that this happened. Okay, I can see what happened there. I can see what I did. And yeah. And what I found can work is you can just set your intention, say, well, it'd be great if I didn't do that anymore. I aspire to that. That's what I desire. But I'm not going to try and will my way through it. I'm not going to try and write it down and remember it and do it all the time. I mean, you can do that once in a while with something that's actually dangerous. Yes, you should do that. If the thing is actually dangerous. It's a gas leak or remembering to turn off the stove. Yes, you need to do it with things like that. But when it's in a relationship, there's nothing dangerous here. Um, it's best, I think, to just open space for it and be aware of it and don't try to change it. And miraculously, I've seen this and I've seen it with clients. I've seen it in my own relationships that it'll just go away on its own. It's like magic, really. Just the awareness. There's something about just being aware of it and keeping it in mind a bit. That'll do it. You don't even have to try to keep it in mind either. Just set your intention, desire to do that or aspire to do it, and don't try and force it or make it happen. And quite often, not always, but yeah, I don't know what the percentage is. I don't know, but more often than not, I've seen the thing just evaporate. Sometimes it does not. Sometimes it stays. Because I think some things it's not time for them to go yet. It's just not time for them to change. But it still doesn't hurt to be aware around this whole process. We're talking about just one isolated thing that might not change, but all kinds of other things will. So in a relationship, if you've got, I don't know, a dozen problematic things, if 8 of them change, that's really good, right? You're doing pretty good. So this process of being triggered, it's the first step in it is to be aware when you're triggered. So having awareness around that, knowing, hey, I'm triggered right now. In the process, it tends to go that if you decide you're going to do this, if you decide you're going to, set your intention and aspire to improve your relationship, and this works with all kinds of relationships, business relationships, whatever it is, but it particularly in, partnerships and with family members. So the first thing is just to be aware that you're triggered. So that's the first step. If you can just do that, you've made progress. And the way it tends to work is then, you decide you're going to do this, you decide you're going to be aware, is you will judge someone, you'll get triggered by them, you may say stuff, you may have an argument. Then after the argument's over, the person goes away, you sit down, you're still a bit upset, and you think, oh yeah, I was supposed to be aware when I got triggered. I think I just got triggered. You might not think that for a couple hours. So when you first start, right? So don't expect, oh, I'm going to think not to judge people, and then I just won't judge people anymore. So, and that's the way it goes. It'll happen a while after the argument at first. Then it'll start happening. There's improvement when the argument ends or is just about ending, and you think about it then. Oh, I'm triggered. Oh, I'm upset at them. That's huge progress, really. Because then eventually you'll think about it in the middle of the argument. Then you'll think about it right in the beginning, and then you'll think about it before, and you'll actually change what you do. You don't have to think or try to do that. You will naturally not, you'll be in a different emotional state. So you'll just have different behaviors. Because when you can be aware of these things, then you can gain control of your own emotional state eventually. And any amount of control of it is good. Any amount of awareness of it, where it's a better word than control, really. The connotations of control, there's a little too much efforting in there. It doesn't work as well with efforting. So if you continue to be aware over time, you'll gradually get better and better at it. And your judging will be less and less and less as time goes. And you'll find the things at the end. I mean, you may, you know, never have been violent, but some of us make veiled threats sometimes or accusations at people, right? And you'll find that those will diminish, um, and the corrections will diminish. And if you can just go through a day and just be aware whenever you're blaming or correcting, and it can be a real, if you haven't done this, if you haven't just said, when am I blaming someone or correcting something or someone? And for correction, when you're tracking your thoughts, like as far as a relationship goes, when you're in a actual argument with someone or you have tension between you, the correction I would say is only in there if you say it out loud, if in the relationship, if they hear it. But the correcting in the head, people can do often. Like if you're alone anyway, you're alone in your car, if you're listening to the news and you're correcting things in your head, then that's something to pay attention to, especially if it's happening frequently. But if you haven't done that, you may be surprised how often that you are blaming and correcting and criticizing things. So, and it doesn't mean you don't have discernment. I want to state that again. It doesn't mean that you can't look at something and say, because it's not the looking at the thing and noticing that there is something off or noticing that, wait, this is destructive behavior. It doesn't mean you can't see destructive behavior. It doesn't mean you can't see toxicity. It doesn't mean you can't see these things. It doesn't mean you can't identify them. It means you don't get triggered by them. It means you don't have this well of anger coming up and you want to stop them right now, right? Also, anger isn't bad, so I'm not saying that either. It's fine to be angry, but and also it's fine to be triggered. We're humans, we get triggered, right? We have things happen. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with judging other people. There's nothing wrong with blaming. There's nothing wrong with correcting. There's nothing wrong with criticism. Uh, if we start to look at those things we're doing as wrong, oh no, I judged someone. Oh no, I blamed them. Oh no, I corrected them. Then now we're just doing it to ourselves. And then it's an endless loop, right? It means you're blaming yourself for blaming. You're judging yourself for judging. You're correcting yourself for correcting. You're a person too. It's just as pretty more important that you not do that with yourself. That's what you really want to look at. Because that is what gets the habits going, and that is where we really get wounded, and that is where we start to be less effective in life, and it really reduces our ability to take care of and love ourselves. And if we can't do that, it becomes more and more difficult to function in the world when we've got that going on. And we have value, everyone has value, including yourself. And it's your job on this planet first to take care of yourself. That's your job. That's your number one priority. Blaming and judging and correcting yourself and criticizing yourself, you're not doing your job. It's not going to result in positive things happening, enjoyable things happening to you. Be aware of that as well. So it's just noticing, being aware. Have awareness, see where the things are. This is for inside and outside. I have awareness. Oh, looks like I'm judging again. Oh, looks like I'm blaming again. And I've counted them before, kept track. And it's a fine line. It's, you might be surprised at how often you're doing some of these things. Also, this thing has lots of levels, right? So if you then catch yourself blaming yourself, be aware that you might not want to blame yourself for blaming yourself. And that could just go on forever. Blame yourself for blaming yourself for blaming yourself. Yeah. So getting out of that loop, and I've run into a lot of clients with this, and I've had it to some degree in the past, and I've seen people with it just the loop just keeps going. It's okay. Everything needs to happen the way it's happening. But when you expand your awareness, things change. Things change for the better, the more aware you are of things. So really, this is an exercise in awareness, not an exercise in effort, not an exercise in punishing anyone else or yourself, or an exercise in blame, or an exercise that you're going to get graded on, or an exercise in finding things that are wrong, or placing any other person or yourself or anything as being wrong, or trying to stop or control things and make them not happen or make them happen. This is an exercise in simply expanding awareness, paying attention to what's going on externally, what's going on internally, what's going on with yourself, what's going on with the other person. And I find that really this whole exercise and this whole thing is mostly about, it's about your internal self, and your internal self determines how you behave externally. And when you see other people doing something, like all these things are coming from inside. They're all coming from your internal self, right? All of your ways that you are treating people or seeing them. And when you see people and you judge them, it's the very judgment itself. It's not part of them. It's your judgment. It's part of you. So when you see the other person for being wrong, that's a part of you that's just seeing wrong, because they're not wrong. So you're making up wrong inside of you, and then you see it in others. And usually this is because you see it in yourself, which is why the last thing we want to do with expanding our awareness is to see more wrong in ourselves. We're not broken. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. This is a process. It's a process of growth. It's a process of learning the way that people work, the way that you work internally, learning what's going on inside of you, learning what your emotions are, feeling them, identifying them, seeing where they came from, not tracking down where they came from to go stop or exterminate something like I can't think of an example right now, but not tracking them down, right? Like a detective, but just being curious and seeing, oh, that's where that came from. That's where that's connected to. So, because that can be more learning and more awareness and more expansion. Because as you learn and as you become aware of all these things, you begin to expand and you begin to settle inside and you become stronger, more powerful being. And your capabilities begin to increase. Your creativity increases. Your ability to do things increases. Your internal state becomes more calm and more pleasant, certainly less unpleasant. And you can have better relationships that are more fun, with less arguments and less things that you don't like. So things to try being aware of whether you're judging, blaming, or correcting. Just, be aware throughout the day. See how many times you do it. You don't have to keep exact track, but see how often you're doing that. And then next step, don't blame yourself for what you find, or correct yourself or get down on yourself in any way. That's the false belief that you're broken, that there's something wrong with you, which there isn't. You're simply in a process. So there's nothing wrong with a first grader that they're not in 11th grade. They are simply in first grade. It's not a failing. It's not a wrongness. It's just a stage of development. And that's the way it is for everything with everybody. Your main focus is to look at yourself and see that that's the case with you. So just raise your awareness, pay attention to those things. And then when you're in a relationship, also pay attention. Pay attention when you get triggered. Be aware of it when it happens, and then see that process unfold where you'll begin to become aware of it sooner and sooner. And wow, just these two things. Yeah. Try those and see what happens. See how those work. Okay, I think we're going to wrap up the podcast for today, and we will see you next time. Hi, guys. If you could like, subscribe, follow, share, that way I can help bring you more information and better podcasts in the future. Thanks.